A Sense of Beauty by Cornconic. "What's up with her, Sammy?" Stephen grunted, puffing on his half-burnt cigarette. It was early morning, the rising sun cresting the horizon and engulfing the gaps of the forest with its light. Slowly but surely, the day's warmth was chasing away the nightly spring air, the tree leaves illuminated in their gorgeous silky green. All seemed right as Stephen absent-mindedly tapped a chunk of ash onto the ground, leaning over the edge of the cabin balcony. From across the sparkling river that curled past their remote home sat a single bear, reclined against the thick tree trunk.
"Oh, that's Susie,"
Samantha cooed as she hurried outside in a dressing gown, joining her husband at his side. "Funny name for a bear," Stephen muttered. A slight breeze was picking up, the cool air blowing pleasantly across his stubbled chin. "Is it the one you've been taking care of?"
"Yeah, she looks a lot better now, don't you think? Compared to a few weeks ago."
Stephen eyed the animal. A healthy, shiny coat of fur hung from its frame, in stark contrast to the bony, disheveled thing it had been the first time they'd laid eyes upon it. I guess. Maybe a little less skinny. Not that I appreciate the amount of food you're giving it. I was gonna eat those leftovers from last night, you know."
"Sorry,"
Samantha chuckled.
"But it was a funny sight. You should have seen her eating. I think I finally found someone who likes my lamb better than you."
Stephen couldn't help but let slip a small smile, even as he tried to remain frustrated. Quickly, he reasserted himself. "You've a good heart, Sammy, but really, I don't know why you're bothering feeding it. If it dies, it dies. Better to just let it happen naturally. Besides, we don't really know what might happen in the long term. What if one day it comes and brings its entire pack?"
"Bears don't travel in packs, dummy. They're not wolves. They're solitary animals."
"Whatever. What I know is that they're smart creatures. Keep feeding them and they'll keep coming back for more."
"Well, we're in no shortage of food."
"It's not just that," Stephen interrupted, fidgeting with his lighter. The couple's conversation had distracted them from the sudden silencing of the forest. Within moments, the birdsong had diminished, and the crickets' chirps were dying down to a steady silence. It interferes with the natural order. In nature, only the strongest are meant to survive. Outside help disrupts the principle. Samantha raised an eyebrow.
"Well, Mr. Darwin," she spoke, "how interesting it is to hear your hypothesis, but I doubt saving one stray bear will make a whole lot of difference."
Stephen shrugged. "One bear won't do much, but if more and more people start saving them..." He glanced at Samantha's smiling face, her dark pupils reflecting the dawn's glow. A wet crackling sound shot into his left ear, and he swore. Just for a second, he could see some unfathomable mass occurring within the forest, its limbs heaving and scraping against the damp soil as it slithered towards the cabin. He took a sharp breath, as if to shout or scream, but let it go as the sight was elbowed out of his mind by some unnatural force. Forget it," he spoke, unconsciously turning his head away. "Just remember not to get too close. It may look all cute and cuddly, but that thing right there is a killing machine. Top of the food chain. Would rip you apart if you looked at it the wrong way. Used to be dozens of disappearances around these parts in the woods, back when it was still being mapped out. Whose fault do you think they were, huh? The salmon's."
"Suppose you're right."
The couple continued to stare at the animal. It was just sat as it was before, backed up against the tree trunk with its paws by its sides and its legs lay out on the grass.
"What do you think it's doing?"
Samantha queried. Stephen squinted. "See, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, it's been sat like that for a while now. It can't be sleeping because its eyes are open. I know that much. Maybe it's scratching its back, but then again it would be standing for that, bouncing up and down. I've seen it in those documentaries."
"I think it's appreciating the view."
Ugh, as if.
"No, it really might be. I read about it online. It's a behavior that's observed all the time in bears.
Bullshit. What purpose would that serve? Nature's a constant battle for survival. It's probably just resting or something, conserving energy and whatnot.
Well, maybe that's part of it. But it's like you said, bears are smart. Some of the smartest animals out there, actually. They have an eye for an aesthetic landscape. A sense of beauty, even.
Yeah, right. And kangaroos can write poetry, and moose can paint portraits, and chickens can... On and on their conversation went, as Susie stared unblinkingly at the thing in the forest. Susie. She had no concept of words, let alone names, but she understood it was something that had been given to her. Some kind of strange, yet comforting noise made only when she was nearby. That, and piles of food dropped from above when she was starving, made two things she'd been given. And though she barely knew why, she felt she could at least do something in return for the pink, fleshy creatures that had already done so much for her, that had treated her so well. Somehow, she knew. She knew that if she took her eyes off that thing in the forest, it would destroy those pink, fleshy creatures. It would unfreeze itself and carry onward, and it would harm those that had helped her. She couldn't allow that to happen, so she sat there, gaze unmoving. And though it had no eyes, nor face, nor any real semblance of a body, Susie could tell that the thing in the forest was looking right at her too. Waiting, though it couldn't wait for long. Susie felt the hunger it radiated burning in her belly, the need to consume so strong it would soon have to move on, to seek different prey. But Susie had time, and so she waited. A little bit of time had passed. The sun was now barely there in its entirety, its bottom tip scraping the last small lip of the horizon. Stephen yawned and scratched his neck. I think I'm gonna head back inside. Those clouds spell out
Hey, look, she's moving!
Samantha suddenly exclaimed. A quiet rustling of foliage could be heard moving away from the cabin. The pair watched as Susie pulled herself onto all fours and slinked away into the forest, casting one final look towards the couple, before disappearing out of sight. Weird, said Stephen, extinguishing his cigarette. Fool's Gold by Cornconic. Here they come, around the corner, sliding into the driveway in their family sedan. They're back from the market, their father's pocket no doubt lined with fresh 50s. The tires roll easily along the gravel, and I pray that lying somewhere in that collection of pebbles and stones is a glass shard, or a rock sharp enough to pierce the tires. My hopes are dashed as the car slows to a stop, the engine fading to silence. The youngest one, the boy, gets out and hurries to the front door. No need to rush, the father proclaims as he strolls outwards in a warm winter coat, his fingers escaping the clamp of the slammed car door behind him. Out comes the wife, wearing a thick cardigan, and behind her walks the little girl in a frilly woolen hat, sucking on her thumb. I concentrate as hard as I can on the feeling of the girl's teeth sliding up against the skin of her finger in her mouth, peeling it open like a fruit as she trips and falls face first onto the ground. I visualize it, taste the blood in my mouth, project it onto the child. The front door clicks shut behind them. I curse silently and close the blinds. Hunger stabs through my body as I stick my hands outwards towards the dying fireplace. I feel my extremities turning numb as another ice chill blows through the hole in the roof. A chipped bowl sits on the rack above the fire. Lukewarm broth for dinner again, it seems. Just like yesterday. And the day before that. Suddenly a noise. I rush back over to the window. It's music. The family's shadows flicker across the walls as they dance to an upbeat tune. I grasp a piece of rubble from the window ledge and fantasize about throwing it through that living room window. The satisfaction would be immense. The immediate screams of the mother, followed by the wailing of the children and the sheer confusion of the father as he scrambles to his feet from his armchair, the broken glass crinkling under his slippers. I scowl and slink to the back window. An ugly field of greenish-brown glares back at me, insulting me with its mere presence. Its surface is dry and scabby, with a flock of hungry birds pecking at the soil in hopes of a quick meal. My eyes scan along the grassy patches, checking for any slight disturbance in the dull colors, any hint of yellow. I thought I saw one the other day, a gleaming nugget lying on the earth. I sprinted towards it, my eyes wide as saucers. Then a patch of loose soil dislodged my footing and sent me tumbling head over heels. By the time I had scrambled back to my feet, the nugget was gone, and in its place was a dead squirrel. Its insides burst open. I looked around, but the family was nowhere to be seen. Those bastards. They were probably sniggering to themselves as I scrambled back to my house, the nugget clenched within their father's greedy fist. I spend most of my days spying on them, sometimes sneaking up for a closer look. I've only been spotted a few times by the youngest son, but they always just dismiss it as him seeing things. An overactive imagination, as they put it. Sometimes he catches me staring from the window. Other times it's when I'm up close in the bushes. He reacts the same way every time, whimpering pathetically at first, then running back into the house, or hiding somewhere he thinks I can't see him. Little wimp. I overhear their conversations a lot. They must know I'm nearby because they only talk about mundane topics that they know I wouldn't be interested in. The father talks about his job sometimes, but I know it's only a guise for how they truly make their money. He drives a few miles away to sell the amount they stole from the previous day, while the children get to work pilfering the newly emerged pickings under the command of their mother. I tried everything. I stayed up countless nights watching the land like a hawk. I dug pits 10 feet deep, trying to distinguish between a mole-hole and a tunnel scratched through the ground by an 8-year-old boy. I checked my rainwater bucket for hallucinogens and watched the skies for any potential airdrops. Nothing. How they continue to get away with it every night used to baffle me. I had always assumed they must have had access to a state-of-the-art technology, the kind of stuff someone like me could never dream of. Of course, I never bothered to introduce myself. They pretend that I don't exist, that the house opposite their luxury abode is abandoned. I've heard the mother talk of saving up enough money to seize the land ownership and renovate the place themselves. That bitch. But they know I'm here, they must do. They know I can't contact the authorities to confront them on their burglary, or they would surely inquire into my state of living. Squatting is a harsh word, but I imagine that's what most people would call it. It never made much sense to me. The house is old, falling into disrepair. I can't waste any time tending to its upkeep, lest I sacrifice my safety in the hands of those brutes. The second I drop my guard, they'll surely come for me, drive me out and force me to live on the country roads like some sort of animal. No, I can't let that happen. I'll die before they force me out of here. It was my father who told me about this place. He spoke of it upon his deathbed, enlightened me of the potential, told me, and only me, it was the source of his well-amounted wealth. The rest of my family wouldn't believe me, neither would the nurses or doctors. They said that he was just confused, that his ramblings were a byproduct of dementia, a condition of which he had been suffering as of late. But I saw past their lies. I knew that in that brief moment of clarity he was onto something big and promising. When I first ran away, I saw my missing posters for a few months afterward. I tore one off the telephone pole it was stapled to, once, just to get a look at it. It had all my details on it, my hair, my eye color, even a note saying I had a mental illness. Can you believe their nerve? Making up something like that just to get a few extra pity points. It's sickening. One day I'll go back and show them how wrong they were. One day. The rustling of faraway trees in the wind snaps me out of my daydream. Sounds like there's a storm coming. I shiver and tiptoe to the musty table in the center of the room. I can't believe it took me this long to figure out how they did it. To think how accidental it was, too. I learnt of their secret by pure chance. They had this horrible mangy mutt, an ugly pit bull that would constantly sniff around the building. I had to hide whenever it came nearby, or else it would bark and shout and prompt one of the parents to come bring it back home again. Well, one day I was feeling particularly moody, and there it went, sniffing around the field as per usual, and I had had enough. It didn't take long. I just crept up on it from behind and gave it a quick whack over the head with a rusty shovel. It dropped like a stiff brick, and I dragged it back inside to cook it up for dinner. At first, I started slicing little pieces off and sticking them onto the fire, but that's when I saw it. A teensy glimmer in the flesh reflecting the light of the moon shining in through the windows. I peeled open the wound a little deeper and found an entire chunk of gold poking through its body. I could barely contain myself. I grabbed a pocket knife from one of the kitchen drawers and sliced its belly open, and what did I find? It was stuffed to the brim with gleaming gold pieces. I remember staring in shock for what felt like hours. For weeks and weeks, I had racked my brain trying to come up with a solution for the family's thefts. And now that solution was staring me in the face with its milky, lifeless eyes. They were using their dog as a fucking courier, stuffing it with pilfered gold and, presumably, waiting for it to shit it back out again. Their ingenuity was proven. I'll give them that. I scooped it out and stashed it away underneath the floorboards. I haven't touched it since. As for the body, I stomped on its head a few times and left it sitting outside their front doorstep. The littlest one found it first and gave me the biggest laugh of my life when I saw their stupid face contort and start bawling. Of course, they weren't really sad about the dog. They were sad about the profits they had lost, but they did a damn good job of pretending that they were. They even made a little grave for it in their back garden. Its name was Fido, apparently. The father mentioned something about being the fault of a wolf or fox, but I'm pretty sure he knew it was me. It was a message after all, a way of saying that I had cracked their secret, that I knew what they were up to. I thought I had put a stop to it once and for all, that they would have no choice but to move away and leave me in my lonesome, now that I had halted their primary source of income. But they adapted. Those clever bastards adapted. My gold was still nowhere to be found. The field was bare. I knew for a fact they hadn't bought a new dog. So what could it have been? Well, I have a theory. The parents have been pushing the little boy to get closer to the house, to build up his confidence. I saw him playing just the other day with a couple of sticks. What's that got to do with anything, you may ask? Well, if they smuggle gold through a dog's body, they could surely do the same with a child's, right? Foot and Mouth by Cornconic. Hannah and Joey walked happily down the path, laughing and chatting like little children. "Hey, look!" Joey exclaimed, pointing a finger at a nearby farmhouse. It stood just on the cusp of a woodland area, obscured by a cluster of willow trees. The windows were greasy with dirt and grime, and the house's wooden exterior had been worn by the elements, but there were fresh footsteps in the mud, and a single light on in one of the bedrooms. A small field of sheep sat quietly in front of the property, seemingly undisturbed.
"It's where old Jim lives, the one with the crooked eye," said Hannah. "Do you remember the group of kids that went missing around here? Well, I heard he ate them, buried their skeletons in that field. I wouldn't be surprised. He's a total creep."
"I heard he set a whole flock of cattle on fire and let them loose across the countryside. He's crazy like that, apparently."
"I'll give you $5 if you go over there and knock on the door," Hannah challenged with a mischievous grin.
Joey snickered, excitedly, considering the idea. "Nah," he responded with a dismissive wave. "He's not worth the trouble. Let's check out the field. Maybe we can find some skeletons of our own."
"Are you crazy? I was only joking about the $5. That old coot probably shoot us if we get close enough."
"We'll be fine. He never even comes out of the house anymore. Worst he'll do is yell at us."
"All right, if you're sure,"
Hannah muttered, still somewhat uncomfortable with the proposal. For a second, she swore she saw a pale silhouette in one of the farmhouse windows, but within a moment, it had vanished. The pair shared another crude laugh at Jimmy's expense, and they strolled onwards towards the field. The smell of the fresh soil grew slowly stronger as they reached the splintered gate. Just before Joey could place a hand on the rough surface, Hannah stopped, holding him back with her hand.
"There's something here,"
she said, gesturing to a beaten signpost. "Warning, foot and mouth, keep out," it read in faded painted letters. Hannah narrowed her eyes a little.
"Isn't that some sort of disease? I don't want to come down with something."
Joey sighed with an exaggerated roll of his eyes. "Humans can't get foot and mouth, dummy. Only animals. We're fine."
"Are you sure? Why would they?"
Joey tutted and walked along through the gate, cutting her off. Mildly irked, she trailed meekly behind him. The sheep awkwardly trotted away whenever the pair got close, backing up to a corner and baaing timidly. They seemed only to gather around the field's edges, leaving a sizable spot in the middle devoid of dropping and overgrown with uneaten grass. "That's funny. They don't look infected with anything." Hannah paused suddenly, noticing a group of fissures on the ground. Thick, lengthy fractures were split through the dirt like a broken window. A strange feeling washed over her as she ran her fingers along the cracks. They felt almost warm, as if they were alive.
"I don't like this. Something's wrong. This place just feels off."
Hannah spoke nervously, glancing back and forth at the sheep. Was it her imagination? Or were they all just staring? Not eating, not tending to their young, just staring at her and Joey. Joey looked over his shoulder, approaching Hannah with a smug expression that masked his growing anxiety. "Stop being such a baby, they're just sheep."
"It's not really the sheep I'm worried about."
Joey noticed it too. Dead silence, completely out of the blue. Not even the tweet of a bird or the rustle of wind along the grass could be heard in the void of noise. It was like time had frozen. Joey's face turned deathly pale, and with wide eyes he pointed down at the grass. A single human finger lay upon the upturned soil, shriveled up and covered in flies. The skin was flaky and bloodless, and the nail hanged loosely by a small strip of tissue.
Those missing kids,"
Joey finally spoke, frozen in horror. Hannah saw a face from the corner of her eye and gasped. It was old Jimmy, watching from the farmhouse window with a crooked eye and an anticipating smile on full display. Without warning, a gargantuan foot fell from the sky, crushing Joey like a cockroach, before soaring back out of sight. Hannah screamed, only managing to turn back towards the gate before a huge mouth broke through the cracks in the soil, swallowing her whole and disappearing back into the earth. Jimmy stared from the farmhouse window, struggling to contain his laughter. With a wicked smile, he added 2 more tally marks to the blackboard in his hands.
Number 26 and number 27. Never gets old,
he remarked, leaning back in his rocking chair.
Never gets old.